You are not going to believe what happens when you give a plant coffee instead of water.
Plants versus Zombies Garden War.
The plants in the Plants vs. Zombies universe are one of the more interesting factions I've come across, handling magic, military-grade weaponry, futuristic technology, mild robotics, and even creating their own zombies sometimes. Being born understanding what its purpose is and taking to it like a fish to water, and also following the leadership of a scientific super genius by the name of Crazy Dave, who also might be a schizophrenic. This is a very powerful faction, and they also seem to be generally good in regards to morals. In Rimworld, a place morals as well as the sanctity of human life go to die, there is not a significant amount of sentient plants, save for the Goronlin tree, capable of making several different types of plant creatures. A popular mod, though, among the community, has released a series of phytokin, a sort of tree girl, who have a different breed of magic for each type of tree they have an affinity for. However, these Rule 34 tree girls won't be enough to constitute a heavy plant military faction. Thus, I'm introducing the two following races. The first being the Citron, a physically strong and capable combat unit with an affinity for science and acidic blood detonation, acidic spew attacks, reminiscent of a citrus fruit. I obviously made him as a reference to the pea shooter. Then we have the Weed. They are well capable of handling most forms of work, are dead calm, and can spread their genes to other pawns. However, they have recessive genetics, making any child produced by them to have identical genetics to the opposite parent, are entirely vegetarian, and are also incapable of psychics. In other words, they're NPCs, laborers, cannon fodder, farm tools, if you will. That being said, we picked the tribal start and have the following settings of blood and dust and no reloads, meaning we have only one shot at this playthrough, and any mistake that I make that isn't so comically stupid that I edited out of the video will be the end of the series. Dropping into a temperate forest that's permanent summer, we got to work almost immediately, and both of my weeds immediately contracted food poisoning because they're herbivores and pemmican has meat in it, and setting up a sizable growing zone that avoids trees, as due to our ideology, our entire faction are a bunch of insufferable crybabies when it comes to trees, and we'll have depressive episodes if they cut down even a single one. So for now, we were going to have to settle with quite possibly one of the ugliest buildings I've ever created, and Mazumba got into a fight with a rat where he poured acid all over him.
Sulfuric acid!
Starting off out of the various tree girls, our biggest asset early game is going to be the Goronlinkin, as on top of being a little bit better Goronlin trees, even though I overhauled them for this video, is that they can spawn their own dried companions even without a tree totally for free. Mazumba got to work as our head researcher, and then our first raid showed up in the form of another mouse. This time a mouse person, who immediately realized that just because it isn't a snake doesn't mean that it isn't still venomous. And then he went back and wooed one of the NPCs before finishing up our first research and moving on to drug production because Mazumba has a genetic dependency on weed. And the opening days were pretty consistent. A raid would occur, and then Mazumba would go and spit acid everywhere while the Dryads would block for him, because they can be drafted for some reason, and within seconds they would be puddles on the floor. We did try to save one of the furries for the purpose of mutating them into a weed, and started making bricks on top of them to help them sleep better. Mazumba and the Dryads once again went on a murder spree with some small vicious Animalia tribe, and then the whole team hit the gritty with a bunch of party balloons, and it was so successful that another Goronlin pod sprouted. We tuned it to Rose the Goronlinkin, obviously, and set it to produce wood makers so we had a way of obtaining logs without the entire tribe falling to unfathomable sadness. That furry died in the brick closet. I don't know why, but I don't think it had anything to do with the fact that I gave her smoke leaf or barely fed her, but we also had a pretty decent deal for a new pawn, being we had to take care of some random bizarre mod animals for a free orc, who we could then convert into a weed before he even has a chance to talk. We probably have to make a cage for them, though. Our little Dryad friend was already making us some wood so we could branch into some other production. Rose was then stabbed 57 times by a bunch of hostile deer, but fortunately Mazumba rallied the troops and saved her just in time, only to go back and immediately continue his speedrun to microelectronics. It just feels really good having somebody who can actually competently research again after that whole orcs video. The weird animals started producing sussy milk. We accepted a child into our group who we also kicked out almost immediately because we couldn't turn him into a weed immediately. I know, the humanitarian thing would have been to organ murder him, heart, lungs, liver, nerve style, but I wasn't feeling it. We put the weird bull things inside the ship, and then our newest weed came to live with us, following with one quick, extremely painful, non-consensual surgery. We made Bream the moral guide because I planned to make Mazumba the war leader and Rose the leader of the whole faction, and we got to building a massive wall around the forest. The plan being to have a very large Garonlan tree environment along with any other rich plants that we can find, which will help out our situation. Allowing us to kind of mass an army of dryads for virtually any occasion, Mazumba and we got married and Bream got to work converting the new hire. Furthermore, we made it to microelectronics and we were making great time in order to get the things we need. One of the weeds got inspired taming, so I found a megasloth and it became our megasloth. Then a bunch of vicious and aggressive butterflies came to attack, who were pretty easy to murder but did still do significant bleeding damage, which was more than I expected from a butterfly. Bream then contracted Benadryl herpes, and a few minutes after being treated, became a slaughterer and murdered one of the instantly respawnable Dryad companions before Mazumba could apprehend her. We then got a quest for a Phytokin, luckily, and even more so, it was a Garonlan Kimd named Lemon. Even more so, she's basically free because skeletons don't have any standing forces. Surely we wouldn't lose her due to something stupid. This overgrown drop pod landed nearby. I had never gotten this event before, so I waited to see what actually happened, but pretty much all it did was just spawn hostile plant creatures, and I didn't want to bother taming them while they were attacking, so I just smashed the pod. Some elven traders came whom we purchased a sentience catalyst from. We made Bream the moral guide again after her crash out, and then after the Garonlan pod sprouted, I don't think this one was us either. I think we just got lucky for this one. Mazumba's weed wife was pregnant and planted the sapling baby next to the rice. As soon as the second Garonlan tree was ready, we tuned Lemon to it, and a bunch of guinea pigs kept deciding that they belonged to us, but since they're basically zero maintenance emotional support dogs that nobody cares if you kick them into a wood chipper, I kept them around. We purchased a combine heavy shotgun for Mazumba using a comical amount of weed so it could kill people in other ways than just war criming them to death with acid. We finished microelectronics. Wow, that's so slow compared to orcs. It only takes them like 400 fucking days to do it. I'm still mad about that playthrough. We continued brainwashing the new weed to accept his role. Our plant-based religion was progressing rather well altogether, so well people just started giving us gold. Mazumba discovered pants, and then we got another raid. The first one in a while, and it was the nefarious Pigs faction. And it was a good thing Mazumba got that shotgun, as this pigskin raid had boar skins with them. Large, powerful, muscular variants of pigskins who can take a shit ton of abuse. Though Mazumba, in addition to the shotgun, also introduced them to the joys of being violently liquefied in acid.
Jesus Christ!
Mazumba and the companion dryads finished off the remaining Don't Starve pigmen. Our Megasloth overseas intern bled to death after the fight. Several people got sick because Cassandra hates me more than Randy does. This turtle filed a complaint to HR, Mazumba described him buckshot mouthwash, and Bream wasted her preach health to make sure Rose survived her sickness. Only for the custom Xenotype faction to pod right into our new base and attack. And this raid contained both Ratlors and Burgerkins, the main Xenotypes from previous playthroughs. Mazumba, of course, just kept being Mazumba, and since they podded into a building with only one exit, none of them left the place alive. A former lover of weeds with paralytic abasia crashed in, which does kind of harm the whole recessive genetics thing I have going on here, but unfortunately this is a humanitarian playthrough, so we kind of had to take her in, just to appease weed. Gilrod event where the fish became temporarily stunted, oh no, anything but that. And then a defoliator ship crashed and started trying to ruin the environment. Mazumba and the Dryads' first plan for dealing with all this was to attack the Mechanoids while they were still sleeping using a Dryad to lock each one down in melee combat, but since Mechanoids are better than Dryads at melee combat generally, and they're immune to Mazumba's war crime acid, we actually had to tactically retreat and Mazumba had to get help from the weeds and other plants. Moving back in, we did take over the defoliator ship, but since everyone was on the verge of bleeding out after the fight, Mazumba had to wait till later to go back and break the ship. Afterwards, we had a hate speech carnival where we celebrated murdering a bunch of oil-drinking clankers. A large part of the lower forest caught on fire. I don't remember why, but for some reason fires don't target anima trees, so I also don't care. Two shopkeepers arrived at once, who both had nothing of value to me, so I just dumped my trash on them, and we started empowering our Garonlan trees using nature shrines. Thanks to a mod, these Garonlan trees aren't buffed using focus, but rather produce more dryads if you spend the time to make these big stupid rocks for them. It's more time-consuming short-term, but I actually think it makes Garonlan trees more practical in the long run, too. And then an anomaly stranger showed up, and I was almost ecstatic to murder him, but once again, this is a humanitarian faction, so I had to deal with him hospitality-wise, which of course meant
We ask them politely yet firmly to leave.
Mazumba finished geothermal power, but our combat was far from over as yet another attack came, this time from the Wasters, meaning I was predicting an easy fight, though I ended up horribly wrong as we charged the first group and one of the weeds going to lock down into melee, only to almost immediately die to his Toxpack release. I had never seen a Toxpack murder somebody so quickly, but we were now back to only 2 weeds, and even more so, we had still had a few other Waster clusters to deal with. However, I wasn't risking any of my other pawns, so I only threw the Dryads and Mazumba after them, doing his infamous spit acid attack everywhere. The attack still went pretty bad for us though, with some of my pawns suffering permanent injuries, and as for Rose...
I lost my whole stomach.
We buried the weeb without a funeral. Plants die pretty much all the time, and none of the other plants cared. This swan and a dryad had a Revengeance-style battle. We got our third Garaman pod sprout, once again entirely unprompted by us, and the Citron future war criminal Bebe Citron was born. Bebe got so upset about her weed dying that it caused her to break out of her paralysis, only to enter a daze. Unfortunately, she kind of sucks as a pawn, so I'll probably be kicking her out anyways. I also realized I had to make baby food because plant mothers don't lactate. No, that was a weird sentence. We finally managed to change that one weed's ideology into ours, so he stops being a little baby about stuff. And then a summit crab showed up. A massive animal that successfully destroys anything it even touches because it is so large. We'll be fine because we'll just stay out of its way, and it's not like he'll bulldoze right through my building, and my pawns will walk right past it.
Wow. What an asshole.
Yeah, that's my mistake. I honestly thought they would be scared and just pathfind around it when they saw him. Anyways, I want a bigger army of companion dryads I can summon at will, so naturally I tried to compensate for this by making Weed hook up with Rose, and it predictably failed. We kicked out BB, we did more than enough for her, and we made a geothermal generator so Mazumba can continue speedrunning the entire research tab, and since we don't have another Garamankin, we made Mazumba the owner of the third tree, and set it to Barkskin Dryad so he always had some damage sponges around. And it half-charged immediately due to all the piles of shrines we had, and the Barksoons, as soon as they spawned, began their yearning for the mines, doing all my mining work for me. The weed's dating pursuits kept just getting worse, and then some zombies showed up. My plan was to just ignore them and wait for them to rot like usual, but at the same time there was some powerful mental force telling me that we needed to fight them instead. Additionally, this Combine citizen landed, so we caged him even though we had no practical use for him, even for turning him into a weed. And then the zombies attacked anyways because one of our weeds got too close to them. Fortunately, due to all the raids, we all had adequate guns for everybody, and the fight went pretty universally in our favor without losing or seriously injuring anybody, with Mazumba very predictably using his war crimes and executing any remaining stragglers. Finally, I just gave up and had Rose romance Weed, who got it on the first try, even though she doesn't like him. I'm honestly just coping over Lemon's death at this point. We accepted some drifters' help temporarily, just so we could increase our construction, only to find out that they're rather crummy workers. Oh well, at least they might make decent cannon fodder if I need them to be. We researched hunter drones so I could drown my next raiders in a sea of wasp traps and sentry drones. The drifters were already starting to cause problems, but they might make decent weeds, so I didn't betray them when I was offered this abysmally low murder deal. I got Mazumba to start training crafting for plate armor while we were waiting for the Dryads to dig out some plasteel for the analyzer, and right on day 100 we received a mechanoid cluster with a tox spewer located a decent ways away from us. Even more so, the toxic spewer activated instantly, already killing some of my plants. We could go and fight the spewer, but we likely would have to have at least some more deaths following it if we didn't at least have plate armor. Furthermore, it's really only Mazumba and the Dryads who have consistent combat experience, so we will likely be at a huge disadvantage if there's a lot of mechs there. We could potentially abandon the settlement temporarily until we gather ourselves for an assault, but we would once again be starting over from scratch. I likely would have had better odds if I didn't let Lemon get run over by a giant crab, but that's neither here nor there. But with this conundrum occurring all the way on day 100, I decided to stop here, with the future of the Plants faction here completely unknown. If you enjoyed this video and you want to see me continue the Plants journey in Rimworld, please leave me a comment down below telling me your thoughts as well as what you would like to see next, both Rimworld and otherwise. And if you're new here and you did enjoy, please consider subscribing with notifications, as I upload new long-form content every week as well as new shorts almost every single day, encapsulating variety content including guides, challenges, memes, audience participation, playthroughs, and even theories. But with that all being said, thank you all again so much for watching, and I will see you all next time.